Do you ever wonder how others see the world that you live in? And how do you see the world that you live in? What is your worldview? I mean, think about it. You live in a world where you're bombarded by messages that tell you that if you just get more temporary people, places, and things, you'll be happy. Yet that pursuit of happiness has not proven to be what it purported to be for everyone. Even those who have had the most success, gained the most notoriety, wealth, power, influence, it's still a world filled with tragedy, with human suffering. It always leaves you wanting more. Now, we consider that great marketing. That's in our system, in this world, right? Not just here in the United States, but around the world, commerce functions on the concept of more. That you must always have more people, places, and things. More money, more power, more influence, more control. And if you did, things would be different. That's what it always tells us. But it still leaves us wanting. It still leaves us wanting more. It never offers true contentment. There's always the bigger, better, newest, faster thing. And we're all locked in. And what drives that system? Money. Money is the root of all kinds of evils. Chief among them, pride and control, as well as fear. In this world, money can solve all kinds of problems in the short term. But isn't it funny how those who have the most money never have enough? They always want more. And the more that they get with their machines of profit, the more they also want more control, more power, more influence. I think there's a reason why it is Jesus said it's easier for a camel to travel through the eye of a needle, than for a rich man to inherit the kingdom of heaven. Wealth is a band aid on a gaping wound. And that gaping wound is bleeding you out every single day of your life. You've heard it said, your heart is where you store your treasure. Now think about that. The heart is the throne room of the spirit that sits on it and runs your life. You have one of two spirits, two kings that rule on that throne in your heart. God, the God of truth and love and justice and mercy and humility, right? Or the lie. It's true. We need, in this realm, financial means to do the things that we need to be able to do to have an impact. But when that becomes more important than anything else, getting the means, using the tool, or having more of the tool to be able to do things, it's amazing how little actually gets done in terms of moving forth the kingdom of heaven. Now, this isn't a diatribe against people that have wealth. It's not what you have. It's how you use what you have and for whom you use what you have. Because what you have, whether you think it is a lot or not enough, both of those paradigms are wrong. What you have is what you have to work with. And God will bless that when you dedicate what you have, what He's given you, to Him, regardless of your circumstances. Oh, but that's not true with the king of lies. That's not true with mammon, the worship of money, the god of wealth, the father of lies. It makes a slave out of you. In my last few talks, I talked about wealth, power, wisdom, luck of this world being symbolized by the red dragon. It also symbolizes war. Why do people fight most wars? Pride, fear, confusion, and to kill, steal, and destroy others because of who, what, and where they are, and what they have, or what they may take from you, or what you think they may take from you. You see how everything here is constantly gaming you? It's deceiving, it's misleading, and it's always offering empty promises. Yet those who have the most wealth, power, influence, never have enough. So, what does it profit a man to gain the entire world and lose his own soul? Now, think about that phrase. What does it profit a man, or a woman for that matter, to gain the entire world? The wealth, the power, the influence, the notoriety, even control. If the actual cost for it is an eternal cost, meaning that to rule for a temporary sliver of time in temporal mortal reality, it costs something of infinitely more value, and that is your eternal soul. Yet our entire system is built upon this, is it not? It's an idol. We pursue our happiness in the futility of the temporal, lying to ourselves, telling us more temporary things, places, and people, the next novelty, the next thing that'll do it. That's all we need in the whole world. And then we'll be content. We'll be happy. But we never are. We're always restless. I pity those that have the most wealth, power, and influence in this world because of the weight of the responsibility they have, not only in this world, but standing before God, having to make an accounting for how they invested what they had in this world for something other than their own personal enrichment. Those who are people of faith that have great wealth and power and influence, we're the first ones to tell you that it comes with a great responsibility. One that also comes with a necessity for their faith in God to guide them and give them wisdom and discernment and direction, because the responsibility they have for it before Him is an eternal weight upon them in the here and now. It's not their wealth, most of them will tell you. It is their stewardship of the wealth that God has entrusted to them. And that is humbling. You know, when God spoke to King Solomon, he said, "You can ask anything of me and I'll give it to you." What King Solomon asked for was not wealth, though he became one of the wealthiest men in human history. What he asked for was wisdom. If he had known what the cost of that wisdom would be, he may not have asked for it. Because wisdom comes with many sorrows. It comes with much grace, but it still comes with many sorrows. You should read the book of Ecclesiastes. You know, the famous song by Kansas, the band Kansas, Dust in the Wind. It's from the book of Ecclesiastes. It is just a chasing after the wind. It's but dust in the wind. Because everything here that we amass, made of the temporal, gifted in the temporal, of the temporal, we leave behind. You never see a moving truck at a funeral. You've heard me say that before. Yet look at how our nation, and in fact all the nations, desire more wealth, power, influence, and control. It's the way of the world. How many times have you heard it said, money makes the world go round? Now let's think about that phrase. The world goes around. Well, there's a reason why there's nothing new under the sun. And the reason why money makes the world go around is because the worship of temporal things, the pursuit of one's happiness apart from God, trying to fill an eternal hole with temporary things, always brings about the same outcomes. It is like a millstone going around and around and around. Now, how many times have you gotten up in the morning, you didn't sleep good, you get up to work, get your coffee, you drive to work, or now you get up and sit in front of a computer if you're lucky enough to be able to do it virtually. And it seems like a millstone tied around your neck. grinding you down. We call it the daily grind, do we not? Where do you think that comes from? Well, back in ancient times, they would daily grind flour. They'd grind the corn, the grain, into flour so they'd have something to eat. And they used a millstone to do it. It was their daily grind. So you're not alone. This is not new. There's nothing new under the sun, right? Money makes the world go round. The world goes around at something akin to 46,000 miles an hour. It's spinning fast. And the earth also goes around the sun. We call it an orbit. The moon goes around Earth in its orbit. It's like a giant millstone, is it not? Grinding out the days and the nights, grinding out the grain. So, one of the metaphors for the good seed and the bad seed, the Bible loves to use agricultural terms, imagery from farming, right? All the way back to the very beginning, the good seed and the bad seed, the serpent seed and the seed of the woman. Why do you think that is? As you listen to another truck going out to grind the grain today. Well, when something is a seed, you have to plant it. When you're planting it, the term, when you're planting a lot of it, right? If you've ever been on a farm, I've got one here, a planter, right? You pull behind a tractor. It broadcasts the seed. It spreads the seed. That's what a broadcaster does. That's where the term broadcasting comes from. Agriculture. And you're either sowing good seed or bad seed on good ground or degrees of bad ground when you're planting seed. That seed is also determined by the weather in terms of its germination, which are regular patterns, right? The seasons. Why do you think we use the term seasons of life? Where do you think that comes from? Where do you think it comes from when I say something like this, which you've heard me say many times before? You will reap what you sow. Well, what is sowing? Sowing is broadcasting seed. It's planting seed. We use the same terminology in financial terms. What is your bond yielding? What is your yield? You've got to have seed capital, right, to start a business. When we talk about the media, radio, television, the internet, whenever you're on social media, whenever you're making a video or you're sharing something, you are broadcasting seed. You're either broadcasting good seed or bad seed. Because you are influencing others. When we talk about the concept of thought or thinking and communications, all the technology that we use to communicate uses broadcasting technology, radios, television, and internet. Why do you think you have wireless communications? It's broadcasting a signal. You're awash in radio frequencies, all broadcasting on various parts of the spectrum something all the time. Why do you think that you would be any different? After all, your body, your physical body, acts as an electrical device in many ways. If you look at how your neurological systems function, how your heart functions, your brain functions, how your muscles contract and relax, right? It's through electrical charges. Your body is electric in many ways. You're both an antenna receiving information and a transmitter broadcasting information. That's what communicating is. I'm doing it right now. I'm broadcasting a signal. I am communicating thoughts and ideas to you. I'm acting as a transmitter in a way. How many times have you heard the term a seed of thought? Seeding somebody's consciousness, their thought life. When you watch television or watch Netflix or whatever, right? That's called programming. Programming is another word for broadcasting. Television programming. You have to program it. All your digital devices are built on code. They are programs. You see, hardware and software work together. For the devices that you listen to, you communicate with, and others communicate with you on, either directly on one-on-one or social media, or indirectly through media programming, broadcasting, right? It took programmers to write the code so that those devices will work to enable you to do those things. And behind the scenes, they have debuggers. They have to constantly debug the programming because of mistakes and because of glitches and corruption that occurs in the programming, in the software, that create vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are exploitable by other kinds of programs. We call it malicious code. There are different kinds of applications of malicious code, and there are different kinds of vulnerabilities which can be exploited by malicious code. Those people that have a background in cybersecurity will understand these concepts very well. You've got things like Trojan horses, denial of service attacks. The people that are exploiting it are outputting, they're transmitting that malicious code into those vulnerabilities, exploiting them. They are broadcasting a signal, and a signal is encoded information. In it is intent, form, function, purpose. So let's move to your DNA. Back during the Clinton administration, they touted the huge step that humanity made by decoding the human genome. There was a big deal, a human genome project. Now, they decoded it. Now, think about that. They decoded the human genome. Now they can edit it. They can edit genes. They can edit your DNA. What do you think was the genesis of COVID-19? It was edited, created, modified in a lab. Now, you can say a lot of things. You can question the intent behind it, which is what everybody's doing. Why would you do that? Why would you question the intent of a lab or a nation state that ran the lab, that decoded a virus and then modified it? Well, clearly, it created an exploit in the nations where that virus spread. That shows intent. If nothing else, and how certain groups, certain nations have exploited it. It created a vulnerability out of a known vulnerability to make it a bigger vulnerability. A vulnerability that everybody has a vulnerability to, and all nations have a vulnerability to. And what happened earlier this year was something the world has never seen before. And that is the world being completely shut down. Regardless of the intent, the very fact that people question the intent should tell you a lot about the things that I'm bringing up to you tonight. There's the law of unintended consequences, and then there's the law of intended consequences. That's information. It's encoded in the action. So are the consequences. So let's talk again about social media. How often do you hear about something going viral online? A news story, an idea, a meme, a video. When something goes viral, it's borrowing from epidemiology. It mimics epidemiology in how it spreads, just like a virus that makes you sick. When it is done with malicious intent or unintendedly spreading something that was, right? Just like people spreading COVID-19 unintentionally. Who's to say that it wasn't spread intentionally as well? There are cases that we know that people intentionally tried to make others sick. Same thing happened during the HIV crisis. There's a pointer towards malicious code at work in the thinking of the individuals that would do such a thing. There's malicious intent. They're transmitting illness. Now think about it. How do you get sick from COVID-19 or any other virus? It's transmitted. Transmitted to you from someone or something else through people, places, and things. What else is transmitted? Signals, broadcasting, programming, ideas, concepts. You communicate them. Diseases that can be spread, that go viral, like the same ideas and concepts that go viral on the internet, right, are called, when it's a sickness, an illness, a pathogen, it's called a communicable disease. Now, think about that. What does that language set tell you? Because it's saying something to you. It's communicating something to you. It's transmitting something to you. So if you can be infected by a communicable disease, why do you think that you cannot be affected and infected by a communicational means, be it in social media, be it in the broadcast media, or be it one-on-one with individuals? How would you know? Do you see how all these things are unified? They're not in separate silos. They actually all have crossover. They all have an interplay, an interrelational context. If you transmit propaganda, you are spreading an informationally communicable disease. You're infecting people with lies. You are broadcasting bad seed. The serpent seed, whether you know it or not. You are transmitting a signal that is disruptive, distorted, and destructive to others, whether you realize it or not. Just like if you're a carrier for a pathogen, but you show no signs of the symptoms of being ill, you may very well infect people who will show those signs and get sick. Whether you realize it or not, you become a transmitter of disease, a communicable disease, a spreader. And what is a spreader in agriculture? It's a planter. It's a broadcaster. It broadcasts seed. So if you're in a lie, or you're in fear and ruled by it, and fear is false evidence appearing real, you are transmitting that and projecting that out. That's what a broadcaster does. That's what a transmission does. You are spreading that lie, your fear, what controls you, the false evidence appearing real, in a communicable way, online and not online, with others. In a social setting, we call it slander, gossip, right? Accusation, confusion, false light. Now think about what I'm telling you. The very systems that you use to communicate, the social media in particular, the platforms are designed to be addictive. They actually change you from a neurological state of being to another neurological state of being. It alters your perceptions, and it does it at such a subtle level you don't even realize it's happening. And if you are consuming lots of information and you don't discern its truthiness, its validity, or you don't care whether it's true. It just meets something that you agree with, whether you're right or wrong about that. What you are doing, or what you're doing is you're being infected and you're infecting others. You are transmitting a communicable informational disease. You are, in a way, acting as malicious code. But you see, that's the rub, right? That's the vulnerability of the temporal, of the flesh. It's corrupted. What do we say happens when malicious code gets into a network and messes up all the data, makes it unusable, scrambles it or destroys it? It's corrupted it, right? The data has been corrupted. What causes you to die in the temporal, in your physical form, is that over time, your DNA breaks down because your DNA has a temporal lifespan. The way it functions is it functions in a way where it copies itself and comes back together. I'm not going to go into very specific details. I'm going to keep it very general. But over time, it weakens. It's given over to entropy. Now, when did death enter into the human experience? It entered in when sin entered in long ago in that Garden of Eden story, right? That's what we're told. When the Nakash, the serpent, the red dragon, the most crafty, the most cunning, the most clever of all the beasts of the field, deceived Adam and Eve. So sin entered in through one man, through Adam. Salvation entered in to reverse the curse through one man, who is the God man, who is fully God and fully man, and that is Yeshua, Jesus. He who was without sin. The good seed. So what does sin do? Sin corrupts. We say that corruption entered into all of creation. What does corruption do? First, it weakens. As it weakens, it breaks down and distorts. And then eventually breaks down to the point where it's destroyed. Malicious code entered into the operating system of all of creation and made all things in creation subject to its corruption and made all things in the temporal corruptible in human nature. Why do you think it is that we speak so much about corruption, malicious code, and the destructiveness of it? Where do you think illness comes from? If death entered in because sin entered in, malicious code entered into the OS of all of creation and human nature, because humanity was separated from their identity in God. They were deceived out of their identity, and their likeness, God made them in his likeness, was corrupted. Though they still bore the image was marred by sin, was corrupted. The OS had been infected like a virus. And so their nature became less like God and more like the beast, the serpent, the red dragon, the Nakash, the father of lies. And what is a lie? In short, the lie, a lie, is a corruption of truth. It's a distortion, a confusing, a mixture. It's deconstructive. That's why a lie always tries to fight against the truth, deconstruct it, and reconstruct it according to its nature. That's death. That's death at work. That's the serpent seed. And you plant seed in the ground, do you not? Just like your body goes into the ground. Just like your shadow lays on the ground. Cast to the dust of the earth from the light that hits a solid object, and the solid object creates, right? Allows for the creation of that shadow on the ground. Because the shadow cannot stand in the presence of the light. So, in a sense, your physical body shields it to allow it to be so. Now, think about that in spiritual terms. Remember me telling you in the last couple of talks from here at the farm about how this, the fallen powers and principalities, right? What dwells in the flesh, what runs the world domination system, ultimately the powers of darkness, the father of lies, the Nakash, Satan, right? Needs you to shield it from the light that exposes it. And it does that by deceiving and enslaving you to force you to do it because it is in pride and cannot admit that it is already defeated and that it needs you. It wants you to need it. It is a lie. They can't function without you. The lie can't exist without the truth. The truth exists without the lie. It doesn't need a lie to exist. It exists regardless. It exposes the lie. So when the seed is planted into the ground and it first sprouts, it looks a lot like the good seed, right? When you plant a garden, you plant wheat. The weeds and the wheat, when they're young, look the same. It's hard to tell the difference. But when it matures, when it's fully grown, you can tell. So when sin is fully mature, it gives birth to its kind, its own fruit. The fruit of lies, the fruit of pride, the fruit of a lie and pride is what? Ultimately, it's destruction. Sow the wind, reap the whirlwind. You know that wind creates a frequency or set of frequencies. Static electricity can build up because of particles in the wind, in the air, moving against other surfaces, right? That build up a static electricity charge. If you sow the wind of false doctrine, the wind of lies, deception, confusion, you will reap the whirlwind. A whirlwind brings destruction, confusion, chaos. And what did I tell you? That the Babylonian goddess of the sea was called, of chaos, right? The Babylonian goddess of chaos is called Tiamat. And Tiamat was represented by a seven-headed red dragon in various cultures. There's lots of names for it. And there's also the male and female versions of it throughout the cultures. Just like the DNA strand can now be looked at as a symbolic meaning of the male and female, Hamadryad, king cobra, male, and the python, female, the serpent. Death in Hades, death in the grave, because that's what kills you. One of the things. Your DNA breaking down. Because everything that's forged of the temporal is temporary. It has a temporary lifespan. King cobra is a viper and poisons you. That's a neurotoxin. then swallows you whole, right? Devours you. A python wraps around you, crushes you to death, and then swallows you whole, just like the grave. It squeezes the breath out of you. What happens when you die? You breathe your last breath in the temporal. And you blink one last time, and then you're in eternity. That's why we say it's appointed once for people to die. Then comes the judgment. You stand before God in a blink of an eye. And you get to see all that you planted, good and bad, the good seed and the bad seed, and you find out which seed you are if you don't already know. And of course you do, before you even blink that last time. Now, we all need grace because we all make mistakes. God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called by his name. But you have to accept that. That's a gift. That's a gift of salvation and grace. That means you have to be humble enough to realize your predicament and that your works and your wisdom and your flesh, according to you, are insufficient. You cannot fix an infinite problem with a temporary band-aid. You cannot pay an infinite debt. Once you're standing in the infinite and have based your entire life previous in the temporal, having denied in pride your predicament in your flesh. That is akin to throwing the most valuable thing in the box from Amazon in the trash and keeping the perishable box and calling it valuable. That's insanity. That's what pride does. What was the valuable thing you would have thrown out? In this case, you would have lost your soul. Instead of forgiveness, you chose condemnation. Instead of salvation and eternal life, you chose damnation. You chose the realm of the dead. That's where all the bad seed remains. And because it is of its darkness, because if you live only for the temporal, you follow your temporal body where it goes when it is dead, right where that shadow is on the ground. Ashes to ashes and dust to dust. And at that point, you have lost everything, temporal and eternal. And for what? So you could live a lie in your temporal life and deny everything beyond, knowing full well in your heart that you're doing that and choosing your pride anyway. Now think about how God does this. How many times have you heard stories about people nearing death coming to know the Lord? Now, science will try to tell you all kinds of things because science is based in the temporal. I'm not anti-science. I'm anti-science being turned into a god, an idol. Science has its proper context. When it's taken out of its proper context, it becomes scientism. It becomes a scientific faith, a religion of the temporal, by the temporal, and for the temporal. But it's out of context at that point, and it corrupts itself. You can see that happening every day, and how things are misappropriated, misapplied, and misused in it by people, either intentionally or unintentionally through corrupted data. And then people go and they transmit the findings as if it was issued forth from the throne of God itself, and they don't even bother to look to evidence that it may or may not have been in its correct context. And if something is not in its correct context, you may have great observations, but where you take it after the observations are made corrupts the data. And then those that take that and transmit that information to others spreads the confusion, spreads the corruption. And then it becomes fuel for fear, condemnation, division. Fear being false evidence appearing real. Meaning that that information is used to confuse, to dilute, to deceive, to divide, to distort, to devour, and to destroy. And so when scientific findings that are corrupted spread around the internet and the media broadcasts them, they are broadcasting bad seed. There are consequences to broadcasting bad information. And those consequences aggregate and amplify the more it's spread and the more that it's used to make decisions. And those decisions, if based upon it, are bad decisions based on bad data, bad information. they are misled. Starting to see my point here? That is a problem. You're living in an entire world where the things I'm telling you are actively doing exactly what I'm telling you in this little talk. You live in the shadowlands of confusion. So people, if their minds have been blinded by the spirit of the age, by lies, have no discernment, no light to discern what is and what isn't, they are deceived. They are ruled by fear, false evidence appearing real, and they are enslaved to their fear and their confusion, and, like I said, become proxies. They become proxies in the war of the two seeds for the serpent, the Nakash, the red dragon, the beast. And they don't want to admit it because they would have to let go of their pride. And the longer that they hold on to it, the darker their minds get. As I wrote in the lyrics of a song, their mansions of mine turned into the ghettos of lies. As it is for people, so too it is for nations. There are consequences to believing, to choosing, and spreading the communicable disease of the lie. You are in a war. The war of the sons of light, daughters of light, children of God, versus the father of lies, here, the God of this world, who is no God at all, and does not even rule this anymore. That is the serpent. You serve one or the other at any given point in time in your life, every single day. And if you think that you can be perfect, well, then you were really deceived, because we all need God's grace, because we all have gone astray and we all have failed to meet the mark of perfection. That's why we need God's grace to work it together. You will never be perfect in your temporal mortal coils. They are too vulnerable, too weak, and too susceptible to corruption, deception, confusion, and all the things that occur from those in this world. You will never find perfect contentment in pursuing more people, places, and things to consume in this world. Because it's all corrupted and it's corrupting. Now, if you think that you can live in a world where you don't need grace, you're deceiving yourself. You're in a lie. You are a child of the father of lies. But that is your choice. God does not have to deceive or force those that are his to love him. He loves regardless. He loves even those that are at war against him. He loves them so much that he gave them free will and he will not revoke it. Although those in the lie are slaves to something that hates free will, that hates what God gave human beings, and that is the ability to choose. That's why I said earlier in some of the other talks, this is not only the valley of the shadow of death, but it is also the valley of decision. Your temporal life is God's grace that you may make the choice. It's your choice. He does not force it on you. But it is your responsibility to accept whatever choice you make, even if you don't like the outcomes, if you choose a lie. But of course, pride, right? Being a slave to pride, which is what happens when you have chosen to live a lie, and you're a slave to sin and corruption and fear, false evidence appearing real. Well, you don't like to accept responsibility now, do you? Because that means you have to admit your insufficiencies, that you're wrong, that you blew it, that you made a mistake, that you are a liar. But in the end, no human being stands before the throne of God and gets away with saying they are without sin. Because that is what the temporal flesh is bound to. And if you live your life to that which is bound to the grave, and bound to lies, and bound to pride, and bound to fear, you'll never pursue anything but your eventual termination in the grave. But that is not where it ends. You'll pay the price for all eternity for it. Because that is your choice. Unless you humble yourselves and you admit the truth about yourself and that you cannot fix yourself. You cannot use what is corrupted, your flesh, your wisdom, and your works to right what is already wrong. You cannot use The very thing ruled by self will run riotous. To fix self will run riotous. It already is what it is. It's not going to change. Of course, the lie will tell you that you can never change. Well, that's true. You can't. Only God can change you from the inside out. And that's a gift. See, that's the other half. That's why the powers of darkness, the lie, doesn't want you to know the other half. It doesn't want you to know that you can be free from it because it is dependent on you and in deceiving you to devour you to maintain its power and control and sustenance to continue existing as your master, deceiving you out of what and who you really are in the here and now and forever after. You are in a war. And what do I always say? There are only three kinds of people in a war. There are no civilians in this war. There are soldiers, prisoners, and casualties. Which one are you? And which one are you going to be? And for whom? You're in a world of darkness. Now, the irony is, science tells us, right, that something on the order of 94.7% of the universe is made up of dark energy and dark matter. They're not really sure what it is, but they're sure that that's what it's made out of. Isn't it interesting they call it dark matter? What if we are the ones in the dark? What if what they call the 90 some odd percent, 94%, whatever, right, of the universe is actually light and we're living in a photographic negative? Now consider that for a moment. How would you know? Well, after all, you are in a world of darkness. You're in a world where the spirit of the age blinds the minds of people to their predicament. And nothing good dwells in the flesh. And the darkness in this world needs light. Remember, Jesus came as the light. And when he left, he said to his people, to those that followed him, you are the light. Let your light shine before all humanity. And what does light do? It exposes what was previously hidden in the darkness. And what hides in the darkness? That which is fearful and at war against the light. And what is the light? The light is the light of the truth, and is the truth that sets you free. There, wherein is where the two sides in the true battle, in the meta war, the war beyond all the wars and battles and conflicts you see in this world, that is the primary battlefield. Now think about it. Battlefield. What's the field? Well, that's where the seed's planted. Don't you plant seed in a field? And what is the field? It's the world. And what was the serpent? The Nakash, the glistening one, the shining one, the false light, right? The beast. Well, it was the most cunning, most clever, right? Most deceptive of all the beasts of the field. Welcome to the war. You're in it whether you like it or not. And when I tell you you have to choose your side, you have to choose your side. By not choosing a side, you've chosen the wrong one. Meaning that you've chosen the side of darkness. That's your default setting in the flesh. And I hate to tell you, but that's a war you're going to lose. Now, we're going to get into more about the war and how it works in these next talks. And like I said, I'm going to give you historical, theological, philosophical, political, scientific. I'm going to give you a well-rounded view from multiple perspectives on what you live in, what the battle is, what the battlefield looks like right now. I'm going to get you what we call a SITREP, situational report. I'm going to show you how we got here, and I'm going to show you how this ends and how you fight until the end. Because you're called to fight the good fight. Now you got to know what you're fighting to be able to fight that good fight. And to fight the good fight, you have to know that you are the good seed. And that boils down to knowing who you are in Christ. Who you are. What is your identity? Remember those talks I did earlier, a number of months ago? Who are you? Are you a soldier, a prisoner, or a casualty? Well, I'm here to raise up an army. So you've been drafted. And if you got this far, you're already a soldier. Now it's time for live training in the middle of the battlefield. And you're going to find you've been in it and been being trained your entire life, regardless. Stand your ground. Stay vigilant. Seek the truth in all things. Seek God. Seek truth and love, that justice and mercy may prevail from humble and contrite hearts. God bless you, and good night.